Special thanks to Tokyo Treat and Sakurako for sponsoring today's video. When Ichigo is killed by Ulquiorra's segunda etapa, Zangetsu takes over his body, transforming him into a new, monstrous version of himself, one that runs purely on protective instinct. Now donning a horned helmet that harkens back to the very origin of the hollow powers that infected Ichigo's mother and then himself, this version of Ichigo, dubbed Full Hollow or Vasto Lorde Ichigo by the community, proceeds to dominate and tear Ulquiorra apart, displaying an incredible level of ferocity and power, the likes of which we had never seen from the main character prior to that, and in many ways never really saw again. And unfortunately, despite its incredible power, this version of Ichigo isn't around for long. As soon as Ulquiorra manages to sever one of Ichigo's horns, the form reverts, freeing Ichigo of Zangetsu's influence. But what if this version of Ichigo had survived beyond this battle and somehow made it to the fake Karakura town? Now, how he does so isn't important. What's important is who he ends up fighting. How does the Full Hollow or Vasto Lorde version of Ichigo fare against the top three Espada? Coyote Starrk, Baraggan Louisenbairn, and Harribel? Well, in today's video, I want to take a look. We're going to evaluate, based on what little we see of this version of Ichigo in the manga, how he might stack up to these three Espada, who are, at least by Ulquiorra's own admission, stronger than him. How will Full Hollow Ichigo, unshackled, unbound, and seemingly unstoppable, prove himself against Aizen's ultimate Rankar? Let's dive in. Before we get started, consider checking out the Patreon down in the description below. Your support over there does go a very long way to ensuring the continued longevity and health of the channel, and it does mean absolutely everything, so thank you so very much to everyone supporting me over there. It does mean the world. And speaking of supporting the channel, first, before we begin, a word from today's sponsor. So, with the weather heating up and friends and family coming together under the sun, what better time is there than now to celebrate the vibrancy of Osaka's food culture and the heritage of Hiroshima with the latest boxes from Tokyo Treat and Sakurako? So let's dive in. Tokyo Treat is an exclusive monthly snack box packed to the brim with a carefully curated selection to help you experience Japanese culture from the comfort of your own home. This month, visit the eclectic and colourful city of Osaka as part of the Osaka Snacktacular theme, and discover a range of snacks including salted caramel Kit Kats, mini sugar donuts, octopus rice crackers, and more. Speaking of colourful and eclectic, I think the contents of the box speak for themselves this time around. We're going to start with the Kit Kats as we normally do. Salted caramel, let's give them a try. Immediately it smells like caramel, straight as soon as the wrapping comes off. I like the different colours going on there as well. Let's dive in. The caramel, of course, mixes really well with the chocolate. There is a slight accent of salt in there. It's really well done, and a very nice Kit Kat, to be honest. And then I've got to do it as if we're on the seafront itself, one of the mini sugar donuts, or as the packaging says, young donuts, which is interesting. It feels wrong to be demolishing these donuts in their infancy, but that's what we're going to do. These donuts bring real seaside vibes, and that is absolutely perfect for the kind of weather we're finally getting here in the UK. This is absolutely the right kind of snack to be having on a day like today. Meanwhile, Sakurako takes us instead to Hiroshima, birthplace of our very own Kubo himself, and offers up a box full of hand-picked artisanal snacks designed to reflect Hiroshima's own cultural blend of nature, culture, and history, with such snacks as a Satouchi lemon cookie, Kyoho grape chocolate crunch, and more, and can be paired with the month's included traditional kudzuyu drink. Plus, the month's tableware item is this ceramic indigo plate. So as indicated by the cultural guide booklet that comes with every single box, both Tokyo Treat and Sakurako, in this month's Sakurako box there are a lot of items hailing from Satochi, specifically many of the citrus items that feature the flavours of the fruits of Satochi itself. I have located the Satochi lemon cookie, this delightful little packaging here. Let's give it a go. I was probably supposed to talk about it first, but I've already eaten half of it, so it's very, very nice. There is a lemon flavour that really comes through here. It's absolutely delicious. I love lemon flavour in general, so this is a very good box for me. Yeah, this is really nice stuff. But it's not all lemon, as I noted earlier. We have muscat grape jellies here. And again, like I said, these look really cool. And yeah, they taste really nice as well. I mean, grape is a great flavour. So yeah, you can't go wrong with these. See, that's kind of cool, and I assume intentional when you bite into this thing. it actually looks like a grape. So that's pretty neat. And like I said earlier, each box also comes with a cultural booklet that features snack descriptions, allergen information, and of course some insights into the cultural theming of the month's boxes as well. Alright, but that's it for May's boxes. As always, a big thank you to Tokyo Treat and Sakurako for continuing to support the channel. It is greatly appreciated. If you'd like to pick up either of these boxes and experience some of the tastes of Japan for yourself, then visit the link in the description or the pinned comment down below and use my code TOMO for an exclusive offer of $5 off of your first order. Not only do you save some money, but by doing so you directly support the channel as well. So thanks everyone, and as always, enjoy. Now, due to how little we actually see of Full Hollow Ichigo's capabilities in the manga, it is imperative that we take note of what we do know, what we do see him achieve in his brief battle with Ulquiorra. Almost as soon as their battle begins, we see Zangetsu pull off a trick that no Shinigami has ever done before. He literally calls his blade to him from afar, simply holding out his hand and watching as Tensa Zangetsu flies over, springing out of the ground and into Ichigo's open waiting palm. Of course, this is only possible because the being now fully in control of Ichigo's body is none other than Zangetsu himself, which is an interesting idea when factoring in the blade is me, but still, this is pretty cool, and of course is designed to show an even greater control over Zangetsu than ever before. As Ichigo's Shinigami and Hollow powers are inherently fused together, this also means this being is capable of using Hollow abilities, something which Ichigo is only now starting to freely do so himself as of the end of the 1000-year Blood War arc. A simple flick of his sword is then capable of obliterating the ground around him, before he then conjures a massive Sero, one big enough to not only collide with Ulquiorra's Sero Osculus, but even overcome it, as Ulquiorra himself is forced onto the back foot. Ichigo then appears directly behind Ulquiorra and cuts off the Espada's arm with ease. As Ulquiorra attempts to use a second Lanza del Relampago against Ichigo after the first one missed, the hollow-fied Shinigami slips behind the Espada using Sonido instead of Shunpo, allowing him to move without being detected by Ulquiorra's Pesquisa. This means he's capable of sneaking up on the Espada as though moving in silence. Demonstrating his animalistic physical strength, Full Hollow Ichigo then catches the end of Ulquiorra's Lanza del Relampago in his bare hand, an ability that devastated a massive portion of the Hueco Mundo desert mere moments ago, and proceeds to shatter it, completely overpowering both the attack and Ulquiorra himself. As Ichigo then cuts Ulquiorra down with one swing, he proceeds to obliterate the Espada's lower half with a point-blank Sero. Ichigo is only freed from Zangetsu's control once Ulquiorra successfully cuts a horn from the mask, seemingly breaking Zangetsu's hold. Though it's difficult to know for certain if that's exactly why he was released, it is totally possible it was the backfiring of the Sero that came about as a result of the horn being cut off, but to be honest, I'm fairly firm in the belief that separating a portion of the mask from its hole is what achieved this, making the mask no longer complete. And to be fair, this is interesting because it presents a potentially big weakness for this form that's ready to be exploited. If the mask itself is what's holding all of this together, and it can be broken by a swing from Lanza del Relampago, it opens it up to being destroyed by the top 3 Espada, at least potentially anyway. The real trick, of course, is going to be getting close enough to Full Hollow Ichigo in the first place. The only reason Ulquiorra was able to strike was because Ichigo's attention was on Uryu. Though the sheer fact that Ulquiorra got as close as he did to Ichigo in the first place seems to be a reverse of their earlier situation. Ulquiorra was also capable of slipping through Ichigo's own Pesquisa in this form, and was able to strike without being noticed. At least that's what I took from it anyway, which feels like something else that needs to be taken into account when deciding a battle between two extremely powerful hollows. Essentially two Espada, as Harribel notes when she watches Ichigo's much earlier battle against Grimjo. Either way, it is clear that Full Hollow Ichigo performs abnormally well against Ulquiorra's Segunda Etapa, insofar as he doesn't take a single scratch of damage until he loses his horn, which effectively ends the fight. Does this mean Full Hollow Ichigo is therefore something of an extremely volatile glass cannon? It's hard to say, but for now, what we see is what we get. A terrifyingly efficient and powerful killer, completely unfettered from the usual quote-unquote weaknesses one might associate with Ichigo. Restraint, morality, and the like. So, how would this translate to battles against the top 3 Espada? Not too long ago, I posted a community poll featuring a battle between Full Hollow Ichigo and the Primera Espada Stark, which, by the way, wasn't the impetus for this video, but it is interesting to look back on it, as well. You guys were pretty definitive in your belief that Ichigo would win, to the point where 84% of the almost 40,000 voters said Ichigo would emerge victorious. And I get it. I would be inclined to agree myself, but I also don't think it's that straightforward either. And of course, crucially, a binary poll like this doesn't allow for much in the way of nuance. Someone has to win. But if we put Stark on the back burner for now, let's begin with the third Espada tier, Harribel, who I have always said was done incredibly dirty in the manga, so much so that it has completely skewed how powerful the community thinks she is, especially in relation to the other Espada. And again, I completely get it. What other conclusion are we to draw? Harribel's time in the spotlight is not only minimal, but completely neutered by her horrible matchup with Hitsugaya. On top of that, she just fights in a strangely passive way after releasing her Resurrection. Just compare the way she was utterly brutalizing Hitsugaya in her base form, even when he was using bankai, to the way she kind of mopes around after releasing Tiburon, never really feeling in control of the battle again. The truth is, she doesn't really demonstrate much of anything on the page that indicates she deserves to be the third Espada, at least back when the Espada rankings solely designated their strength. In her Resurrection, Harribel controls water, which is a powerful element to command. And who knows, against an opponent whose own power isn't, well, basically just this, but better, maybe she would have a bit more luck. But when it comes to how she performs in the manga, there really isn't much to go on aside from a slow, meandering back and forth with Hitsugaya before he just effortlessly defeats her. Hell, the most impressive thing Harribel does is take on 3 characters at once, and even that happens almost entirely off-screen. Look, the crucial takeaway here, and something I cannot stress enough, is that I do not think Harribel is weak. More than anything, she is a huge victim of circumstance. To be honest, all of the top 3 Espada are, but she more so than anyone else, and that sucks. But based on what we get to see from her in the manga, it's no surprise at all to me that many people think Ulquiorra should have been ranked higher. While I think Ulquiorra's power, compared with Baraggan and Stark, is a lot more contentious, there's no doubt in my mind Harribel is much less impressive than the 4th Espada. Truth be told, the inherent difficulty with a conversation like this comes from the character's individual abilities varying so greatly. For example, does Xyloporo really deserve to only be the 8th Espada when he has so many crazy abilities at his disposal? Way back in the day when these guys were only ranked by their so-called strength, in quotes, what about Zamari really meant that he should have been above Xyloporo? Compared then with Harribel, who is likely the superior physical fighter, there's just so much more Xyloporo can do, from commanding an army of clones to destroying his opponent's internal organs, and yes, even resurrecting himself from death. That's what makes it difficult, but that does also lead us to Harribel versus Full Hollow Ichigo, and I think it's pretty clear from what I've said so far that I don't really think Harribel stands a chance against this form. Harribel and Ulquiorra even have similar temperaments. So what we see from Ulquiorra is likely to be how Harribel approaches and assesses the situation as well. And for what it's worth, I actually don't think there's anything wrong with the way Ulquiorra faced down Ichigo here. In fact, I think he does a pretty good job. He was up against an opponent who literally died by his hand, and yet stood up again, no longer displaying any of his former self, his former humanity. He's an opponent who defied convention, and who then proceeded to be far, far stronger as well. And as an aside, it's pretty cool that much of Ulquiorra's character stems from his worldview, his ironclad worldview that whatever isn't reflected in his eyes simply doesn't exist, and yet his eyes bear witness to Ichigo's resurrection, meaning it must be true, at least as far as he's concerned, which is pretty cool. Anyway, when it comes to how Harribel would perform against Ichigo, I don't imagine, therefore, it would be much different to how Ulquiorra did, honestly. At best, she might be able to conjure some crushing waves in an attempt to keep Ichigo at bay, but realistically, she's going to be defeated just as easily, if not easier, since she frankly has less impressive powers than Ulquiorra. For example, as far as we know, if the exact same scenario plays out, ending in Ichigo cutting off Harribel's arm, this time that arm isn't coming back. And then it may as well be over. At the very least, Ulquiorra has his unusually impressive high-speed regeneration. Now, before we continue, I just want to ask you guys to hit subscribe down below if you haven't done already. If you are new to the channel or you simply haven't hit that button yet, I would love to reach 300,000 subscribers by the end of 2026. It's looking kind of touch and go, and it's only going to be possible with your help. Over 50%, over half of my viewers aren't yet subscribed. So I'd love to get that number down a little bit if we can, and bump the subscriber number up. To be honest, the subscriber ratio is pretty good, sitting at over 40%, but I'd like to get it even higher. It's only going to be doable with your help. It's quick, it's easy, it's free. If you like the video, please consider doing that now. Again, it would be greatly appreciated. But speaking of losing limbs, this is where things get a little more interesting. While I don't think Harribel presents a different enough challenge compared with Ulquiorra before us, the second Espada, Baraggan Louisenbairn, absolutely does. And this is a challenge that I struggle to see Full Hollow Ichigo overcoming. Obviously, Baraggan's battle against Soifon and Omaida suffers from similar problems to Hitsugaya versus Harribel, an overall lack of urgency that makes the Espada appear weaker and less capable than they really are. But the key difference here is that Baraggan's power, both on paper and in execution, is on a completely different level to Harribel's control over water. Baraggan's Respirar is absolute. As I explained in a recent video, actually looking at Baraggan versus Ulquiorra, this ability is a rule that must be adhered to. Whenever something comes into contact with Respirar, it will rot down to the bone, and then keep going until there's nothing left but ash. It cannot be stopped. Even Baraggan himself is constantly trying to keep his own power at bay. And so, going back to that video, and if you haven't checked it out, I implore you to do so, as I'm quite proud of it, I fail to see how this duel, Full Hollow Ichigo versus Baraggan, would necessarily play out any differently on the surface to Ulquiorra versus Baraggan. Yes, Full Hollow Ichigo is stronger, faster, and more dangerous than Ulquiorra. But on the other hand, Respirar is Respirar at the end of the day. It's all-encompassing and can't be stopped. That's kind of the point, and why I say it's an ability that should be classified as a rule. Not only that, but in his Resurrection, Baraggan is constantly surrounded by a veil of Respirar at all times that can't be penetrated. And the thing is, we see characters launching numerous different attempts at defeating the Espada, trying all manner of tricks, from Omaida kicking debris towards Baraggan to Soifon blasting him with her bankai, to the means that everyone expected to work, Hachi's Kido, and none initially were successful. The only time they came close was by combining Soifon's bankai and Hachi's Kido, before Hachi finally discovered the means of circumventing Respirar itself. Because Respirar is so unstoppable, Hachi's own decaying arm had to be placed inside Baraggan himself, which is a totally crazy spell when you think about it, and crucially not something really anyone else could have done, barring true Kido experts, because it totally defies the norm. Basically saying that the only way to get around Respirar is to use magic, and highly advanced magic at that. Now, is Full Hollow Ichigo stronger than both Soifon and Hachi? Yes, but Ichigo is a fairly conventional fighter at heart. Even with new hollow abilities at his disposal in this form, Ichigo is still mostly just going to be trying to get close enough to Baraggan to attack with his Zanpakuto, and that simply isn't going to work. Unless it's revealed that Full Hollow Ichigo somehow moves so fast that Respirar can't touch him. But again, that just makes no sense when Baraggan himself is literally outputting Respirar all the time. There is simply no way to reach him. Ichigo's very similar to Ulquiorra in that sense, and ironically that's what makes their fight so excellent, their similarities. If Ichigo fires a Sero at Baraggan, it will be aged before it touches him, as it's an energy blast generated by a being, and we see that Sero are only temporary to begin with, as they dissipate almost immediately after being fired. It's not as though they continue onwards indefinitely. Now, on the flip side, that doesn't necessarily mean Baraggan can automatically defeat and kill Ichigo either. His biggest weakness is his attitude. A lifetime of having a godlike power has made him incredibly arrogant and even reckless in a way Stark, Harribel, and Ulquiorra simply aren't. I think there's every chance he would underestimate Ichigo from the start, but even then, what's next? And then there's the question of how Respirar might affect Ichigo too. For starters, this version of Ichigo fights almost purely on, as I said earlier, a protective instinct. He's more like an animal than anything else. Would he detect immediately how Respirar works simply by sensing it? Would he know to avoid it? Or would it take his limb being aged for it to sink in? Of course, Full Hollow Ichigo would just cut his own limb off instantly were it to be snagged by the miasma, and as we've seen, he has an incredible level of high-speed regeneration. In fact, maybe that's the secret to this battle. Ulquiorra notes that his regenerative powers surpass basically all the other Espada. And I mentioned in that previous video that that would play a big role in a potential fight between the two of them. However, Ulquiorra still wouldn't come out on top, because crucially, even he can't restore his internal organs, meaning Respirar can still just kill him outright. However, Ichigo subconsciously restores his heart when he reverts back to his normal self in the wake of his rampage, which actually is something I don't see people talking about all that much. Like, sure, we don't 100% know how this works, but at least on the surface, this is high-speed regeneration that surpasses even Ulquiorra's own. So does this mean Full Hollow Ichigo can restore his internal organs, and how exactly does that work? How quickly can he do it? Basically what I'm getting at is, could Full Hollow Ichigo rush Baraggan, take the brunt of the Respirar, kill the Espada, and then quickly regenerate any parts of himself that are rotting away, including his internal organs? I don't know, that still feels like a reach to me. And also in this example, we are assuming Full Hollow Ichigo could just kill Baraggan quickly, but this is the same guy who tanked a direct hit from Jakuho Raikoben. Again, this is a point I've made before, but I would caution anyone against underestimating Baraggan himself just because he relies on Respirar almost entirely. It is made pretty clear that he himself is a monster in many ways. He's not the King of Hollows for nothing. Also, what if Respirar caught Ichigo's mask? You know, if it began to age his horns, for example, would that just be it for this form? Being totally honest, I kind of think Baraggan wins this fight, purely because I struggle to envision a means for Ichigo to get around Respirar, and maybe that's going to be unpopular, I don't know, but it's very similar to Ulquiorra versus Baraggan in that sense. again, Full Hollow Ichigo is kind of Ulquiorra's Segunda Etapa, but amped up to 11, which is a crazy thing to consider, but if Ulquiorra's not getting around Respirar, I don't see how Ichigo is either. Now, does Baraggan have the raw fighting skills to overcome Full Hollow Ichigo? Probably not. Although again, like I said, I don't think it's smart to underestimate the King of Waco Mundo in that way either, but he does have Respirar at his disposal, and barring some kind of busted situational win condition that only select characters have access to, I just don't see how Ichigo gets around this power. As I've mentioned before, it's very similar to Liege. How are characters that don't have the Shinken Hakyoken going to defeat this guy? The short answer is, they're not. It would have to be something completely out of left field, something that barely makes sense. Like I said before, Ichigo is able to survive Respirar for long enough to then kill Baraggan and heal himself. Or maybe he moves so fast that Respirar can't work, but again, that just makes no sense to me. Or maybe a Acero is capable of injuring Baraggan if it detonates directly next to his head. But again, the only reason that strategy worked on Baraggan in the manga is because he had nowhere to run, and Ichigo has no means of containing him. I guess there is one final option. Ichigo is so powerful in this form that his Reiatsu quashes Respirar up close. But I'll be totally honest, not only do I not think that's the case, I simply don't think that's how it works either. So right now, I'm leaning towards Baraggan winning this, but it's undoubtedly a tough one. And that just leaves one final member of the top 3 Espada, the Primera Espada, Coyote Starrk, and the participant of the poll I posted a while back. Only 16% of people backed Stark's corner, and again, I get it. In a way, I think the outlook is kind of bleak. For starters, Starrk doesn't really have the temperament to deal with Full Hollow Ichigo, for being honest. He's even more passive than Ulquiorra, and while he's perhaps the most perceptive and analytical of the Espada, that truthfully isn't really going to do him that much good here. Full Hollow Ichigo is nothing if not straightforward, and so there isn't really anything to suss out that you can gain a lot from. It's not like fighting Kyoraku, where Starrk was able to decipher his trickster sword-fighting style early on. Now, interestingly, we do see Full Hollow Ichigo combating a Acero, and a particularly powerful one at that, Ulquiorra's Acero Oscurus, which is a Acero only Espada in their released state can use. And despite his proficiency with Acero, Starrk never uses one of these. So we have to ask the question, how does something like Acero Metroletta compare? Could one Acero from Full Hollow Ichigo overwhelm it? Or would his Acero be pushed back by the sheer number of them? Now don't forget, Acero Metroletta was so overwhelming that Kyoraku himself was about to use bankai when faced with it. And to be fair to Starrk as well, he does say that he can fire 1,000 rounds at one spot in an instant. Which is not only absurd, but I imagine would have likely been the strongest instance of a Acero we'd ever seen used. Now, we don't get to see this, but Starrk is similar to Ulquiorra in that he is not the kind of villain to overstate his capabilities. Whatever Starrk says he can do, I would be inclined to believe it. And so while we don't know for certain, you only have to envision what 1,000 Acero all at once directed at one spot actually looks like. Acero Metroletta was already a devastating ability and didn't seem to be close to that many, personally. Either way, if I'm being completely honest, I don't think Acero alone is going to be enough to overcome Full Hollow Ichigo, no matter how rapid and powerful they really are. Maybe I'm underselling Starrk's Acero capabilities, but I don't know, I think he needs more. Thankfully then, he has his Wolf Army, which is going to be his ace in the hole here against Ichigo. Again, recently I made a video talking about why I thought Starrk was the strongest Espada, and why it all comes down to his Wolf Warhead ability, why it's secretly one of the most underrated and broken powers in all of Bleach, and I totally stand by that. From afar, Starrk can assault Ichigo with a legion of wolves who will detonate as soon as they either get near to Ichigo or manage to grab a hold of him, causing a massive explosion. Now, again, it's difficult to determine exactly how powerful or how much damage these wolves would do to Ichigo. They manage to seriously wound Love and Rose, but again, full Hollow Ichigo feels like a totally different beast entirely. Considering full Hollow Ichigo was capable of grabbing Lanza del Relampago in his bare hand, which, let's face it, is kind of like grabbing a nuke and then crushing it, even weathering the resulting explosion too, I have a hard time imagining the individual wolves are going to really hurt full Hollow Ichigo at all. The key, though, of course, is the sheer volume of wolves that Stark is capable of conjuring, as well as the ease at which he's able to do so. As I've reiterated numerous times, what makes Stark truly dangerous is the fact that he has a seemingly limitless well of Raryoku to pull from, and so these wolves will just keep coming, and they will keep assaulting Ichigo. Even if Ichigo blows a wave of them away with the Sero, they'll simply reform and add to the ongoing attack. And then there's Stark himself, perhaps one of, if not the fastest Espada of the bunch. Now I know Zamari lays claim to that title, but Stark has always seemed faster to me, and isn't the type to go around shouting about it either. Ultimately, Stark feels like an even more evolved version of the likes of Harribel or Ulquiorra. He's wickedly fast, perceptive, and can apply the pressure with his unique special ability that the others simply can't. Ulquiorra is a little more similar, but you only have to look at the difference between how unwieldy Lanza del Relampago is, especially against someone like Full Hollow Ichigo, compared with Stark's wolves, to see why he would struggle against this form of Ichigo more than Stark likely would. Ulquiorra is just left massively open when he tries to use this power in a way that Stark simply isn't. Is Lanza del Relampago more powerful than the individual wolves? Probably, but it doesn't make a difference if you can't hit someone with it. On the flip side, Stark doesn't have the cold disposition of Ulquiorra and is likely to be rattled easier too, which leads me to my final point. The big standout factor that unites the likes of Stark, Harribel, and Ulquiorra compared with Baraggan is that they are all approachable, while Baraggan simply isn't. For all of Stark's speed, his intelligence, and yes, his power, Full Hollow Ichigo can still get up in his face without immediate repercussion, and that is a major problem for the Espada. As I said earlier, Full Hollow Ichigo is an aggressive, if albeit orthodox fighter for the most part. He gets in close to rip and tear the opponent apart, cutting off arms, grappling with special abilities, and even stomping on heads. This is totally possible against even Stark on a baseline level. Sure, Stark might be capable of outmaneuvering him, but the possibility is still there that he's overwhelmed on a sheer physical level. And to be honest, physicality is not Stark's strong suit. We've seen that he struggles up close before, whether that's against Love and his Tengumaru, or Kyoroku and his Katen Kyokotsu. Even once he awakened his fighting spirit, Stark fought the Vizard at range where possible. I definitely see Stark struggling with Full Hollow Ichigo and his innate savagery. At the same time, Stark was capable of dodging Kyoraku at close range with no notice whatsoever, and in fact, Stark doesn't take a single bit of damage in the initial portion of his fight, which I don't think should be overlooked. Anyway, ultimately, what does this mean? Well, I think Full Hollow Ichigo defeats Harribel with little to no issue whatsoever. Like I said, it's a similar showdown to Ulquiorra, only maybe easier? Then we get to Baraggan and Stark. Now, I think Stark is more difficult for Full Hollow Ichigo simply down to the ease of use of his Wolfpack army, and the fact that it's a highly potent ability that enables Stark to fight at range. In fact, Stark's capable of fighting at range with all of his moveset. What happens if one of his Sero clips Ichigo's horns? Is the battle over? Or if one of his wolves blows up next to Ichigo's mask, could that also set Ichigo free? For me, these realities are why the battle against Stark feels the most like a coin toss of the three of them. I don't think it's as straightforward as simply saying Ichigo wins. Do I think that Stark would be mostly on the back foot and acting as defensively as possible? Yeah, probably, but that doesn't mean that he can't pull off a win. And then, when it comes to Baraggan, I don't see how Ichigo can defeat him. He's lacking that totally broken ability that defies convention that would enable him to surpass or circumvent Respirar. Again, maybe I'm missing something here, but based on everything we saw in the manga, it simply feels like Ichigo doesn't really have an answer to such an absolute power, unless some rules get broken somewhere along the way. Alright everyone, but that's it for today's video. As always, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you took something of value away from it as well. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. How does Full Hollow Ichigo fare against the top 3 Espada? Coyote Starrk, Baraggan Louisenbairn, and Harribel. I'd love to get all of your thoughts down in the comments below, so do please let me know how far does he go against the 3rd, then the 2nd, then the 1st Espada again. Do let me know your thoughts. Am I off base here, or do you agree? I'd love to read them, so do please let me know. Alright everyone, once again, thank you so very much for watching. Consider hitting subscribe down below if you haven't done already. It does mean the world. And check out the Patreon as well to support the channel that extra step further here in 2026, to get you naming the credits of every single video, and to get all of my videos absolutely free of YouTube ads over on Patreon. Again, it does mean everything, and a huge thank you and shout out goes out to everyone supporting me over on Patreon. Thank you all so very much. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.